Welcome, adventurers. I know it's been a while, but we're getting back to crafting. Today I'm going to use this stuff, well, most of this stuff, to make these. I wanted to make some highway overpasses for the city streets that I made, and so that's what I'm doing. I decided not to use the cork because it featured so heavily in my last build, and a lot of overpasses, at least here in the US, are made out of concrete, not asphalt. So I started with 1-inch XPS foam, cut it into 6-inch long widths that I then cut down to 4 inches. So to be 6 inches tall by 4 inches wide. And then I decided I wanted actually 3 by 4. So I cut them some more. I wanted the trusses to be 1 inch by 1 inch. So that's what I'm cutting here. Trusses go on top of the concrete columns. And then I bevel the edges at 45 degrees. Pretty standard stuff, nothing too exciting there. Just cutting foam to make synthetic looking concrete columns. I then wanted to make the roadway, so I used 1/2-inch XPS foam, and I cut it to 6-inch widths, which is pretty easy to do since it comes in 12 by 12-inch squares that are mostly 12 by 12 inch. To be perfectly honest, I wasn't terribly concerned if they were perfectly 6 inches wide or not, because my goal is to turn them into rubble and debris and ruin them. So having exactly 6-inch wide roadways wasn't really necessary. It was more to have a standard size and shape for all of this stuff. So here I take one of those trusses. I'm going to make a template out of it because, you know, guys, I hate templates. I find the center mark, 3 inches, come an inch off of each side, and of course mark across. This will never be seen, so leaving the marks on there doesn't really hurt anything. And then I come down halfway, so a 1/2 inch, make a little mark with a pen there, and this will be ultimately my template for how I set up the pinholes, because I use the toothpicks as reinforcing my pieces inside of the foam. So this first piece, I also line up where I want it to be for center point. So when I'm making the holes, I can line up that center column on the truss. As you can see, I eyeballed it. I do that a lot in my builds. I know I don't talk about it all the time, but sometimes for expediency and for ease and just for visual appeal, it's nicer to just eyeball your builds. So using the toothpick kind of like a drill bit, I make it go in as straight as I can until it comes all the way through. I do that with a second toothpick. I know, exciting. And with those 2 toothpicks, I begin the tedious task of marking each and every column and centerpiece that I make. It takes a little while, and for your sake, I didn't record all of it because, well, I respect your sanity, and I don't want you to have to sit through that. So line it up, press together, and now I have uniform, consistent holes. And I do that with all the pieces, just like that. So when I get all those done, which took, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes probably, I began, well, breaking stuff. That's where it gets fun. This is a piece of the 1/2 inch that I cut down to 6 inches wide. Grab the old X-Acto knife and kind of trace a jagged line, just like that. I know, not very hard. And then snap it. The snapping actually gives you some really good natural textures, which is awesome. It likes to snap clean straight on the opposite side, so using the same X-Acto knife, come through, bevel and trim and notch and take out little chunks and make just a general mess of my hobby area. Good thing I have a good vacuum cleaner. But yeah, go through, make it look rough and jagged. This is broken concrete after all, so it's not going to have clean edges. It shouldn't anyway. I'm sure you've all seen what broken concrete looks like, and if you haven't, you can Google it. Okay? Pretty straightforward. So now that I have the decks cut and weathered, I want to add some what looks like rebar. And so I've got this baling wire. I've used it in a few other builds. I made handrails in my flying platforms build with this. I've used it to make wire and stuff that goes, that looks like wire, like electrical wiring, I should say. Because it is wire. It should look like wire. Anyway, I'm using it to make what looks like broken exposed rebar. And it's pretty simple. You cut a length, twist it up a bit, shove it in the styrofoam. A little hot glue holds it in place perfectly. You can also use, oh goodness, Eileen's tacky glue or something similar to that. It just takes longer to dry. If you want to have a better surface contact, hit each piece with a bit of like sandpaper or an emery board, you know, the things that people use to trim their finger or sand down their fingernails, just to give it a little rougher texture. With those pre-poked holes as alignment points, I hot glued the upper and lower piece of the pylons together, and then at the top, doing the same technique, hot glue and toothpicks, attach the road base to the lower column. Now I actually have like a road piece. And I know what you're thinking. That's really narrow and it's not going to stand up on its own, and you are absolutely correct. And later on I will show how I fix that. That definitely wouldn't stand up on its own and didn't, at least not with any miniatures on it. Now I'm going to start cutting the side railing, the curb, or whatever you want to call it, that goes along the side, as you see here. And just with a little hot glue and a sharp knife, I rough up the edges, obviously, with the sharp knife, and then with the hot glue, I kind of glue the side railing in place. That's obviously kind of broken and torn up as well, damaged. And I made it the same lengths. It's 4-inch lengths, if I remember, or 3-inch lengths rather. They're 1/4 inch thick and a 1/2 inch tall. Then I discovered the one point of access that I made for this, the ramp section, where it would be a collapsed roadway down, is too flippin' steep, and any miniature would just slide right down it. So, a pile of debris later, and well, miniatures stay. Now, even with all this, after I got done doing a lot of texturing and whatnot, I discovered that, oh goodness, they'll still slide again, because now it has paint and stuff on it, which made the surface more smooth. So I put some pieces of styrofoam in there to give it some debris, as well as something to block figures from sliding. And just using hot glue and toothpicks like I did before, I got some angle pieces, and hot glued those into place to make these shorter sections stand up on their own. That's how you fix the problem. Something I didn't fully think through when I was doing it. I was like, oh, it'll be fine. And then after I did it, I was like, oh, these are definitely not fine. How did I not think about that? Well, hindsight, 2020 and all. At any rate, they stand up on their own now. Now let's make these look like we've done some actual aging to them. The old-fashioned aluminum foil ballpoint pen for cracks, the aluminum foil is for texture, some randomly glued on rocks for little debris piles, do the same with some sand here and there, and of course gesso, because it gives it an awesome, like, actual concrete looking texture when applied with a sponge like this. I even glue on some rocks from old rock molds that I had laying around, and of course some acetone. Acetone just dissolves XPS foam like nothing, but it gives it a really nice, natural, weather-worn look. Always do this with ventilation, always wear a mask. It puts off fumes. Acetone can really mess you up. Of course, we want to protect this XPS structure because we're going to hit it with spray paint. And spray paint also has accelerants in it like acetone, which are solvents. So a little black paint, water, and Mod Podge. I know some people don't use this anymore, and I cannot find the water-based spray paints. So here we go. Nice gray. It was supposed to be flat, but it's more satin. I don't know why. Black wash, of course, to get in all the nooks and crannies. My black wash turned out a lot darker than I was expecting for some reason. I mean, as you see here. So we bring it down with some country gray as a dry brush. Everybody loves the dry brush. Well, you go over the whole thing, making sure that you don't leave any too big smudges on there. And while that's drying, we're going to thank HM Girl Potpourri, Ryer Tonic, Ian Clark, and the newest patron, Jesper Karkov, and of course, a legendary character, LAJ. Without their help, wouldn't have any of this. So while you're enjoying the glamour shots, I want to talk to you, ask you some questions. Is anybody interested in me doing a live stream or something like that? Never done it before, but if you're interested in that, absolutely let me know in the comments. Let me know what time of the week, nights and weekends are best for me. But I'd be interested in doing that if you would like it, if you think you get something valuable out of it. Oh, and I was lucky with my spans there. I still had my roadways in storage when I started building this, and I got real lucky in remembering how far apart those roadways were, because it spans them exactly right. They said it's better to be lucky than good. Well, I got lucky. I find these to add a lot of dynamic aspect to this. I made them tall enough that larger vehicles and miniatures can go underneath it. Wide enough that they could also be used as platforms for those larger vehicles and miniatures. And obviously modular. Go whatever direction you want, however you want to set it up. Gives you dynamic height advantages, line of sight obstructions, all the things a good tabletop or wargaming table needs. Well, I certainly hope you enjoyed this. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and of course visit my Patreon. And go have an adventure in crafting.